Thank you ever so much for coming. Welcome back and thank you for joining session 3. I'm James Love, Chief Product Officer at Aptem. This series so far has been about how to think about AI. Today is about how to choose tools. Over 45 minutes, I am going to run through an argument that you can apply to everything, a working test you can take into supplier conversations, and we'll do a bit of Q&A at the end. First of all, before we go too far into today's session, a little bit of guidance on webinars themselves. So this session is being recorded. Everyone who signed up will get the recording by email. You can share that with others. Please feel free to do so. If you're wondering why you are unable to talk, your microphone is deliberately turned off. If you need any help, on the right-hand side of your screen, you'll find a chat window. It looks like two speech bubbles next to each other. I've got someone on the call with me who can help you with any issues, technical concerns, or questions as we run through. But questions relating to the topic, please use the Q&A panel, which is to the right-hand side of that chat bubble. Any of the questions we get, if I have time, I will answer them at the end. Of course, if we don't get through to any of your questions, we'll follow up afterwards, or you're always very welcome to contact your Aptem representative or CSM. So, where are we going today? We'll start with the question I think most providers in this sector are asking, and why I think it's probably the wrong question. From there, we'll go into how AI tooling and its landscape is structured across 3 layers, which can be applied across the whole of your business, learner facing. And then ultimately a bit around a test of 7 questions you should be asking every supplier before you sign anything. This is actually anchored on UK GDPR, ICO guidance, and the GISC procurement framework alongside the DfE's own safety standards that they released earlier this year. Then the rollout question, how you actually get this into your organization without sprawl and without paralysis. I'm going to cover a case study from Aptem's own journey into excellence over the last few months or so. I'll be pretty honest about this, talk about some of the messy bits and some of the good bits. Ultimately, I hope to leave you with 6 takeaways and, of course, any time for questions. AI is not the strategy. Excellence in each function is. This is the line that runs through the whole series. If you've been in the previous 2 sessions, you'll have heard me say it. And I'm saying it again because it's the most common misframing I hear when I talk to providers. Boards are asking what their AI strategy is. Leaders are asking where they can use AI. Heads of department are asking whether they should be using ChatGPT or Claude. Every one of those is ultimately and unfortunately the wrong question, at least initially. The right question doesn't mention AI at all. So there are 2 ways of looking at the same point. On the left, the question I hear most, where can we use AI? Structurally, that actually makes AI the goal and the function becomes the dependent variable. You end up scanning your operation for places to drop AI in rather than asking what your operation actually needs. To the right of that, the question I think you should be asking, what does excellent look like in this function? And which tools support it? That puts the function back as the goal, and AI has to earn its place inside that answer. Sometimes it earns a big place, sometimes a small one, and sometimes nothing at all. What often gets missed in this argument is that it's actually the same question that you should be applying to every function on both sides of your business as it happens, whether that's learner focused or operations focused. You're running a training provider, you've got learner operations, of course. That's curriculum, quality, MIS, compliance, IAG, etc. That's the bit the regulator looks at and the bit your customers experience directly. You've also got a business to run. Sales, marketing, finance, HR, IT, operations, etc. the same departments as any organization has. And the same question applies in all of those. The answer is different in each one, and we'll get to that. A bit of a word of validation, because this is a position I've been taking for a while, and I've heard others in the sector say in the same way. But the line on screen is actually from JISC. Their strategic framework applied for AI in colleges, which they actually published back in August of last year. So not quite a year ago, but getting on for a year ago. Before thinking about AI tools, focus on the problems and the challenges you want to solve, not the AI technology. If you work in further education or skills and you haven't read the JISC framework yet, it is worth half an hour at least. Ultimately, though, 3 pillars: skills and culture, technology, and governance. All of that being underpinned by data maturity. What JISC and the AOC have done with that framework is give the sector permission to slow down on the technology question and speed up on the operational one. Ultimately, that's the right call because they actually go hand in hand. So the position holds. The awarding bodies are mostly aligned, believe it or not. The ICO is aligned. The DFE is increasingly aligned. Start with the problem. A quick frame before we get into tools themselves. Most training providers run 2 parallel worlds, and variably they will intermix depending on your organization. On the left, learner operations, apprenticeship delivery, the evidence trail, compliance, learner support. This is the regulated half, as you well know, with ESFA, Ofsted, and the awarding bodies all living here and all taking great interest. Aptum Apprentice is in this half of the stack for most of you on this call. On the right, business operations. The departments any organization has to run: sales, marketing, finance, etc. Often there's a customer success team. Usually there's going to be an ops function that holds things together. The tools here could be Salesforce, Xero, HiBob, Microsoft 365, Google, you name it. The tools you use on a day-to-day basis to do your jobs. These 2 worlds are usually run quite separately inside of a provider as it comes to technology. Different leaders, different budgets, different reporting lines, ultimately different silos operating in their own way. When it comes to AI tooling, though, the question is identical in both. What does excellent look like and what supports it? I'm about to show you a kind of model that equally applies to both. Some of the examples I'll use are learner facing and some are business facing, but the principle holds either way. The model is quite simple. Again, here we've got 3 layers, where you look at layer 1 being the AI that's already embedded inside the products you used. It's a way of thinking of this in terms of closed AI. It's embedded in the host product. And it works because the product already holds your data. It has that context and only operates within that context. Layer 2 is a horizontal general purpose layer with tools like Claude, ChatGPT, Copilot, Gemini. These are cross-cutting and broad, but they really do need guardrails on top. Layer 3 is ultimately what you build, and it's where things get really exciting and really dangerous. Tools you build inside platforms you've already licensed, bespoke applications that you might commission, and at the really advanced end, agentic orchestration that chains AI calls together into multi-step workflows. I say that's dangerous and exciting because it's both. Without the guardrails in place, you will really struggle to achieve level or layer 3. Most providers will ultimately use all 3. The strategic question is where each layer earns its keep and how they reinforce each other rather than overlap too much. Let's run through them. So layer 1, the AI that's already in the tools you use. I'll take the learner side first because it's the cleanest example for this audience, particularly as it's one of ours. Atom Enhance is a deliberate strategic build. It isn't one AI feature, it's a range of capabilities, predominantly LLM driven, but each capability is implemented in a pattern that suits the job. Some features use real-time LLM access, others pre or post-process LLM outputs to structure them and improve them. A few use classification AI, where the workflow needs a structured, auditable output. Marking aid is a great example of classification. Review summarization is a great example of real-time summarization using LLMs. Enhance works because the host product already holds the context. The learner, the program, the KSBs, the eligibility rules, the evidence. The AI doesn't need to import any of that. There's no data movement, no extra DPIA type conversation that needs to take place, no question about where the inputs end up. Other UK examples on the learner side could be Test Group's Coachy, which is an AI tutor scoped to a UK apprenticeship curriculum, specifically in the AI standards. That's built on Claude, and it has the context of that very specific niche use case. Oak National Academy's ILA is DFE backed on the gov.uk Algorithmic Transparency Records Register and built to exceed the DFE's safety standards. The point here is that these are all built for a specific use case, and they're built in context. On the business side, layer one is the AI baked into the tools you already run the business with. And some of you may know these are there, and others may not even realize they're using them. Microsoft Copilot in Microsoft 365 pretty much is available to anybody on the Microsoft ecosystem. Microsoft changed their approach here and they rolled out Copilot to everybody around a year ago. So whether you like it or not, it's there. You may not be using it, and that's perfectly fine. Of course, at enterprise level, these can be enabled or disabled, or certainly have their scope restricted. But the point is, it has the context of perhaps everything that you have in SharePoint, or everything you have access to, or the file you're currently working on. Salesforce Einstein is available in Salesforce. Outreach, as another CRM solution, has several AI capabilities in their sales platform. Tools like HiBob as a HR solution have assistants to help you with HR queries. You can even use AI in screening tools. At Aptem, we use a product called 44 for call intelligence. On our finance side, there is Zero and Zero AI. We also use a product called Fin inside Intercom. Now, that is something you'll experience anytime you go to raise a support ticket with us. And it's an example of something that ties into the support structure with Zendesk Copilot. Ultimately, the same principle is in both halves. AI is good because it holds the host product's context, and that's the context the AI needs to give you an informed output. Even inside one product, the right tool for the right job means different patterns in different places. Layer two are the general purpose tools you already know by name. They're everywhere. Claude, Microsoft Copilot, ChatGPT, Google Gemini. These are connected to your business resources, but they're not necessarily embedded in your business resources, and they aren't required to be connected. They're used for cross-cutting work, drafting, synthesis, research, analysis, anything where the input or output is mostly language. There are, of course, some exceptions to that rule with image generation, particularly with the likes of ChatGPT, but largely it's where your input and output is language-based. The value here is ultimately breadth. The work is putting the guardrails in. I want to give you the strongest example I've seen that came from the FE world, because it lands probably better than anything I could describe in the abstract in terms of what we're doing. Kirklees College, JISC published the case study back in November 2025. But what Kirklees did is build over 130 bespoke custom GPTs on ChatGPT. Each one was aligned to a specific unit, a specific set of assessment criteria, and the relevant awarding body standards. Their initial pilot results suggest 10 to 15 hours saved per staff member per week on marking, moderation, and admin. The work has been led by a project lead inside the college, scaled out from a pilot of 4 staff across 2 departments to a full faculty deployment. What's worth noticing isn't necessarily the saving, it's the operating model. A central template with devolved customization. The college built one master GPT structure, then individual tutors and departments adopted it for their own unit and phased a rollout. They had standardization meetings that linked directly into awarding body QA. Time-limited learner access was given, anonymized workflows for data confidentiality. That is something that actually starts to bridge you from those horizontal general purpose tools back in it almost into layer 1. The context is never going to be quite as rich if you go off and build a fully custom solution like that using a general purpose tool, but it does give you a great amount of autonomy. Layer 2 is ultimately the same general purpose tool that everyone has access to, that you can govern at an institutional level. You can customize it at a unit level, and it ultimately sits well across the education industry at large, but naturally is only really going to be able to touch one part of your organization. So when you're thinking in the 2 halves of your business, learners and tutors and employers are going to interact in one system, and the rest of your business probably operates either also in that solution or in several others. So probably a blend here between layer 1 and layer 2 is where most of you will settle. There are quite a number of other improvements that sort of fit into this category, where JISC AI and marking feedback pilot is running across 14 colleges and 21 universities right now. Cardiff and Vale, Hull, Manchester College, Northampton, Coventry, Loughborough, they're all live. You may not have anything like this running in your provider today, but ultimately the tools are available to you. What Aptem provides through Aptem Enhance gives you a good leg up in terms of that side of your business operation, but looking into the rest of the way your business operates is where you need to be striving for that excellence and what that looks like. Finally, layer 3. It's the part most people are tempted to skip straight to because it sounds really exciting and it truly is amazingly powerful, but it carries risk. There's ultimately 3 subcategories here, from something that's relatively straightforward to genuinely advanced. So first would be building inside what you already license. You already pay for Microsoft 365 or Google Workspace, for example, and both come with a kind of low code automation with Power Apps, Power Automate, Google App Sheet. City College Plymouth actually won awards a couple of years ago for productivity gains using AppSheet on top of their workspace tenancy. There was no new vendor relationship, no new procurement, no new data protection conversation. They're built on top of something that was already governed, but it did require a bespoke set of skills and understanding for what they're doing. Whilst it may be low code, it's not immediately accessible to everyone straight away. Secondly, bespoke in-house builds. Activate Learning in the UK FE space has a digital education team building AI tools internally. That works when the use case is unique enough. The capability is there and the build is governed by a central team rather than left to whoever's free. That's very exciting and very interesting, but again, it requires an understanding of the tools that you're going to be using and a really deep understanding of the excellence that you're aiming towards. Third, and this is the bit that everyone is getting excited about at the minute, but is the most advanced and is the most expensive, is agentic orchestration. Tools that chain multiple AI calls and multiple business tools into a single workflow without needing necessarily any human involvement. Tools like lower end N8N, OpenCore, Zapier, Make. It's really something that requires a greater deal of technical understanding. Aptum ourselves, we're in the middle of an orchestration engine evaluation, and I'm going to talk a bit about what we've been doing in terms of transformation to give you a bit of an understanding of how this could look in practice shortly. Here's the principle, though, that I want you to take from this section, because you may already be doing some of this, and that's fantastic. But this is not a rule for AI. This is a rule for any form of automation. Never automate what you do not yet understand manually. The manual application of a process and running through it tells you where the friction is, where the waste is, where edge cases might sit. Until you've run it by hand, automating it just builds more friction faster. And the cautionary tale here is not about don't use AI. I'm not suggesting don't use AI, but manually run the prompts that you're using, or manually run the tools, understand what they're doing, tweak them, improve them, and then look to automate. The same as you would with any change management. So the practical side here, when you're talking with a supplier, there are really 7 questions that every AI tool should be able to answer before you go ahead and buy it, before you go ahead and make that decision. Whatever layer, whatever supplier, every AI tool you evaluate should be able to answer the same 7 questions. These come ultimately from 3 UK authoritative sources: the ICO's AI guidance and the AI auditing framework, which is the UK GDPR backbone, JISC's AI procurement due diligence framework from July 2024, and the DfE's generative AI product safety standards, published back in January of 2026. 2 lines from the DfE document worth remembering verbatim. 1, where data will be processed and whether there are appropriate safeguards in place if this is outside the UK or EU. So they're not saying don't use it if it's outside of the EU, but they are saying make sure that those safeguards in place. Number 2, not collect, store, share, or use personal data for any commercial purposes, including further model training and fine-tuning, without confirmation of appropriate lawful basis. So those should be core to every supplier review you do, but simplify that now to the 7 questions. Question 1, whose model is this really? Yours, the suppliers, someone else's via an API? If it runs on OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, your data flow extends to them, and their terms become part of your DPIA. Question 2, what did you train it on? And can you prove it? This tells you whether the training data is the supplier's or third party, and whether you can audit it. Question 3, what happens to what I put in? Do you keep it? Do you train on it? Do you share it? Do you sell it? This is the most consequential question by some distance. 3 Samsung engineers leaked confidential code into ChatGPT inside 20 days in 2023. You've probably heard about this. They weren't malicious. They were trying to get their work done. The tool processed what they typed exactly as designed. The data was simply no longer Samsung's once it was typed in. And that isn't a cautionary tale to not use ChatGPT. That's just making sure that you've got the correct settings set up when you use these tools, and you've asked the supplier how to make your system safe. Question 4, where does the data actually live? The UK, US, somewhere else? Whose servers does it sit on? The DfE explicitly requires that this is told to users. Question 5, How long do you keep it for? And how do you get it deleted? Storage limitation is a UK GDPR principle. The right to erasure belongs to your learner, belongs to anybody in your organization when it relates to personal data. Question 6. Can you explain a specific output to me? If you have to justify it to a regulator where AI output materially affects a learner, you need to be able to explain how it was reached. Now, that doesn't extend to giving answers to particular questions someone may ask of an AI assistant, but it would extend to a fully automated marking and decision-making tool. If the human is never in the loop, you need to be able to explain and demonstrate and audit how it was reached. Question 7, what protects my IP and my learner's IP from becoming your training data? Your curriculum, your assessment material, your internal training resources, they're all IP. They shouldn't be ingested training data without your written permission. The DfE makes this explicit. One thing I'll mention on that as well is when you enter something into Claude, for example, and if you take its output verbatim and you present it, there is a real question at the minute as to who owns what you've just put out. Is it your IP anymore? The case law doesn't fully exist yet, but what the general feeling is that if you have just taken the output of the AI tool verbatim, you've done nothing with it, you've not provided significant enough input into that as well as tweaks to the output, it may not even be your IP anymore. That's a separate question than a supplier point, but an interesting and important one nonetheless. Ultimately, if a supplier cannot answer all 7 of these questions, I'm being generous here, within a day, that's your answer. Don't go with that supplier. A short aside from this is ultimately, and because it really matters, is that AI tools that classify, that maybe do evidence mapping, risk scoring, they're really powerful and valuable in a regulated flow. But as I said, you need to make sure that there is explainability. Aptum Enhance has Marking Aid as one example of this, which helps keep the tutor or coach in the loop and provides that full auditability. There's a story here which you're probably familiar with because it's been running for some time. The Turnitin AI detection story is what happens when a tool of that type is deployed without the human in the loop, doing real professional work on top of the output. The classifier output gets treated as a verdict rather than a probability. UK universities have largely backed away from it over 2024 and 2025, and JISC's June 2025 sector position says the mood has now decisively shifted away from automated detection as it relates to plagiarism. The lesson is not that classification AI is bad, it's that AI pattern detection is a tool and learner pattern recognition is a craft. Tools work when they inform the craft, they fail when they override it. That distinction sits behind every one of these 7 questions. Right. So you've chosen your layers, run your suppliers through the 7 questions, and you now have a structural decision to make. How do you actually roll it out across your organization? 3 approaches. There are probably more, but in simple terms. Methodical, where you choose one tool centrally, train everyone on it, integrate it carefully, audit the use. You get really strong governance and a really predictable cost from this, and you get a clean training story. You also get slow learning as a business, and the central choice frequently underfits the actual work on the ground in each team. Devolved would be where you allow and empower leaders to trial and pick and adopt their own tools. You ultimately are more likely to get fit for purpose tools for the given use case, driving towards excellence. You will get fast learning because plenty of things will fail quite quickly, and or they're more specific real use cases that you can learn from. You also get tool sprawl, integration debt, inconsistent data handling, and something called shadow AI or shadow IT, which in a more regulated sense, certainly within GDPR, quickly becomes a DSAR problem. Both pure approaches kind of fail in different ways, and I think they probably both fail a little bit too hard in our sector. The blended approach is ultimately devolved within a central frame. Departments will pick their own tools, run their own experiments, surface their own use cases. Two things are owned centrally, though. A governance framework, which is the registry, the procurement policy, the 7-question test, the DPIA process, and a shared training capability baseline. So everyone is starting from the same floor. This is the working answer for most providers. Not all of you, but most. The right answer depends on regulatory exposure and ultimately which parts of your business you're trying to drive towards excellence. The maturity of your leaders is also a factor, and how far along your change journey you already are. For the majority, though, devolved within a central frame is where you want to land. I'm going to show you what that actually means in a bit more detail. So the blended middle in practice. So you've got centrally owned tooling registries that capture every AI tool any department is evaluating or has put live. This is quite a simple, low friction way of tracking and managing what tools you have, and you probably already have processes in place for tracking tooling in general, so it splices nicely in. The 7-question procurement test is rolled out across the entire organization, and it's applied consistently. A policy spine that importantly is embedded in your existing data, IT, and HR policies rather than living as a separate AI policy document necessarily. We covered a little bit about coming up with your AI charter in the first webinar. JISC's own guidance, for example, here is that a standalone AI policy is usually a mistake. It puts the burden on users to decide whether a feature involves AI, which is rarely clear. However, some really good practice on putting together what is sort of an elevation above a DPIA would be something called an AI SIA, which is an AI impact assessment ultimately. And it's a similar vein to looking at a data protection impact assessment, but with an AI lens over it, and puts it in use case terms, which are easier to understand. And that can go alongside any policy spine that you have already. It's really important here for that centrally owned piece to set up a baseline staff competency program as well, so that no one's starting from zero. And what I mean by this would be education into any policies you may have, as well as what tools you have that are approved and which ones you're allowed to use, and perhaps some basic prompting guidelines. Doesn't need to be heavyweight because the use cases at the devolved level will talk to the specific application and how those teams manage it. So devolved, you've got how each department uses and chooses their tools. Curriculum, quality, compliance on one side, sales, finance, and HR on the other. Their tools, their use cases, their experiments, ultimately their pace. This is what's worth taking away here, is that the first 3 months of this kind of process or adopting in this way are intentionally messy. Parallel experiments will be run with overlapping evaluations, and you'll have partially formed integration points. That's not a failure, that's actually part of the design, allowing you to move faster and generate learning that helps you build that better outcome longer term. The problem you have with a more slow moving approach is that it could take months and months to find out where your problems lie. If you wait for a perfect plan, you've probably already lost. Apart from anything else, the AI world is moving so quickly that by the time you've put that perfect plan together, it's certainly out of date. If you let people do whatever they like with no frame at all, you've certainly already lost, which is why devolves within a central frame is what kind of gets you through. A few watch points to keep an eye on as the first 3 months play out. Tool proliferation before tools are registered. Make registration a condition of trial, not a punishment after the fact. So make sure that that tool is logged before you start trialing it. Make sure that you've asked those questions up front as part of procurement. Don't ask after you've already been trialing. Orchestration decisions can end up being made in isolation. The orchestration question, which is how all of your agents or something may talk together, is architectural and should be centrally owned. But within that first 3 months, the likelihood that you're going to be getting into true agentic orchestration is pretty limited. Remember what I said, manually operate a process or a process change before you try to fully automate it. Some of you may be more advanced already. Customer-facing agent quality during a transition is also something to be mindful of. If there's an AI agent that you're building or rolling out that's going to talk to your learners or your employers, the quality bar, as I'm sure you would agree, is non-negotiable from day one. So how can you trial something like that as an internal tool, learn what isn't quite right, where messy isn't that definitely, that much of a problem, improve then what you'd be rolling out to learners or employers later. There's one thing that ultimately bites kind of silently, and you'd struggle to see it without really reading through and understanding exactly where things are. And that's data quality or data maturity. So AI and agents in general don't really fail visibly when their data that they're getting is drawing from an incorrect place, or perhaps the underlying data itself has errors. They're going to produce outputs that look correct and just unfortunately aren't. So someone in your organization needs to be owning the data quality pretty early on. That doesn't mean doing everything and making sure that all your data sources are perfectly mature and perfectly up to date, but at least understand how they are. And as you focus through each area of excellence, focus on the data needed for that piece, improve it, and then move on. Not a very glamorous part of it, but it's ultimately not optional. AI is never going to turn around to you and say, yes, I checked and actually this data is incorrect. Unless, of course, you ask it to, but that's probably a little bit more advanced, and we'll cover that on another future topic where you can get AI to interrogate and audit itself. So I've talked a lot about general theory, but I wanted to share something about Aptem. So I want to use Aptem itself as a worked example for a few minutes. I want to do this because the temptation when I talk about this kind of material is to think it only applies in somebody else's context. And well, frankly, Aptem isn't a training provider. So who am I to tell you and talk to you about this? Whole business transformation, getting owned by department and governed centrally. That's what I just talked about. And here's what that actually looks like. A quick frame, because I think this matters for how this lands. Obviously, we're not a training provider. We're a software company. We don't train apprentices. We don't run learner operations internally. We have customers, you, and we have business operations that look kind of like yours. We have sales, marketing, finance, people operations, implementation, customer success, etc. One slight difference probably is that we have a product and technology function. Some of you have those as well, but that's probably the key distinction. We're currently, and will probably continue to be, going through our own AI journey for some time, but for several months now, we've been running through a significant investment in AI transformation internally. The question we asked was the same one I asked you at the start. What does excellent look like in each function, and what supports it? It wasn't, where do I use AI? Now, I'm not going to lie, there was an undertone of, how do we use AI here? Probably that's going to be part of the answer, but we really started into looking how we make each of these functions as good as they possibly could be, and aiming towards excellent always. The central spine came first because the central spine is ultimately what holds the rest up. We have an AI owner role in the business. As it happens, that's me. Um, three things that role ultimately aims to deliver, which is the Aptum AI Use and Governance Charter. This is the policy spine that we have. We've had that live since mid last year, I think. Obviously, iterations have been made to it over time, and that sits over the top of our existing data, IT, and HR policies rather than replacing them. We also have introduced, and I mentioned it a moment ago, an AI supplier impact assessment, or AISIA, or the YMCA as I like to call it, because I find it very difficult to say that at pace. We run that jointly with our DPO. The internal version, effectively, of that 7-question test is applied to every new AI tool. Now, we've gone and expanded beyond those 7 questions in that AISIA, and we've been using that now for well over a year. Cross-business infrastructure. On top of that, we use a number of AI tools, but most commonly across the organization, Claude Enterprise. We are currently using the chat and code versions of Claude Enterprise, and we've got a co-work rollout in flight. Why didn't we do that all at once? Because the training burden required for something like co-work as part of Claude is greater. The data risk is greater. So more controls need to be put around it. We didn't hold everything up until we could start using that functionality. We rolled out each piece as quickly as we could to deliver value across each department. We have an inventory of MCPs, connectors, plugins, these things called skills. I'll probably talk about those in a future session if you haven't heard about them already. All tying into a growing orchestration engine, which we're currently evaluating to work out how we get all of these things that have been built by all of these teams and all of these departments to work together as part of one suite. Examples of things we've already rolled out across the board would be our brand skills suite. The deck that you're seeing today has largely been helped and created for me by Claude, and I had to do very little to change it. Now, that doesn't mean to say that Claude built all of it. It certainly didn't. I built the skills in place, worked with marketing, worked with the resources that were available to us. I taught and trained the models I was using to learn about how we like to talk at Aptum and what our visual identity looks like. If you start from scratch, you're not going to get that. But it's a development journey and a real pain point that we already had of people not delivering branded content. We've got our own AI knowledge base, a video lesson library for the team, which is rolling out in the next couple of weeks that kind of talks to that sort of scaled training and scaled understanding across the organization. So that's the frame. Now the work that sits inside it. Sales is pretty advanced here. We have been leveraging Outreach's embedded AI for nearly 2 years. That's layer 1. Bespoke prospecting skills are being worked on, and that's really effectively looking at layer 3. We have people operations rolling out a Claude-based handbook and policy assistant, grounded in our own employee handbook and policies. We do have Pinpoint AI, but we deliberately have decided not to use that for screening and taking specific actions for applicants, but help us understand a little bit more about an applicant as they come in. We mandate in the people operations sense always having that human in the loop, because we want to make sure that we're following and keeping compliant with things like the UK Equality Act. As we look into finance, we're going from sort of 15-day month-end close down to 8 and further. There's a lot of work happening across all departments. Implementation is one that's certainly interesting to call out. Claude access across the team is being rolled out to improve the quality of our implementations. And we're really looking into the process of implementation to make that quicker and more easy for any customers as they come on board or seek to make changes in future. Marketing have a great deal of work to run in the LLM space. They're using it for a lot of research, a bit of a brand guardian. using it to benchmark and understand what's going on in the market. And I'll probably quickly talk about products, given that I'm here and from the product side of things. We are spending a lot of time working out how we can shorten the loop between research and delivery, and getting you product out there and getting you enabled on it. One key example I give here is that we have significantly improved the amount of time it took to research a given idea, where it used to take us months of literal human time, down to days or weeks maximum of duration, not even effort, because we've got agents running behind the scenes continuously scraping and finding research for us. We're continuing that journey into something called design to code, where our product designers will now create prototypes and put together pieces to work straight to code from the design that it came from, rather than having that middle step of front-end engineer coming in. We're seeing accelerations, but we have a long way to go. And I wanted to share this as honestly as I could with you today. Obviously, we'll get to Q&A in a minute. And if you want to ask more questions, please feel free. So 6 things to take away with you from this session. 1, stop asking where you can use AI. Start asking what excellent looks like in each function on both sides of your business. 2, think in 3 layers. Embedded AI in products you already trust, horizontal tools with guardrails, bespoke or in-platform builds. You decide what belongs where based on your maturity. 3, never automate what you do not yet understand manually. Run it by hand, diagnose, then automate. 4, use the 7-question test. If a supplier cannot answer within a week, certainly move on. If they can't answer within a day, I probably move on myself, but let's be fair, maybe a week. Number 5, choose a rollout that fits your reality. Purely central is slow. Purely devolved is potentially chaos. That might work in a smaller organization though. Devolved within a central frame is what we are doing at Aptem, and it's where most of you should be aiming. 6, build the unglamorous bits early. The registration, the policy, procurement test, training, data quality, that kind of thing. Everything we talked about in the first webinar of this series. Make sure you're focusing in on what those painful points are, working out what your intents and how you're going to use AI before you go running into it. It doesn't take long, but that's a really important piece. So finally, that's the session today. Quick note on what comes next. We've got 1 more session in the series before the summer break on the 25th of June. If you scan the QR code on screen, that will take you to a registration page. If you haven't got your phone handy, don't worry, we're going to be staying on the screen for just a moment. You will, of course, get email invitations to this as well. But I'll cover where AI runs into a change problem inside a training provider, because to be honest, that's a pain that we all feel. Change management and the human cost of that is important. And before we go on a slight hiatus over the summer break, I will give you some things to think about over the summer period. So in the meantime, let's have a look and see whether we have any questions before we wrap up for today. Perfectly fine if you haven't thought of any yet. Now is your time to put any questions in the chat. We've got about 8 minutes left. If not, I will maybe allow you all to go a little earlier than usual. Not to worry. Please feel free to send over any questions that you think of afterwards. Oh, hang on, just had one come through, just to say that, of course. So I've got a question here from Andy at Juniper Training. As a small training provider without dedicated AI or development teams, what's the most practical approach to embedding AI across the business while enabling devolved staff-led development rather than relying on central technical teams? I think I need to take a deeper breath before I read that out. I thought it was a shorter question than that. So you don't really need AI or development teams. What you do need is some confidence, and probably pick the person in your organization who is most interested already and potentially most capable, or someone who's using AI significantly already. The reason I say that is that they are going to have some grounding in both what your business does already, as well as potentially being able to be temporarily assigned into a sort of a helper function, where they can go department by department or team by team and talk with them, understand what their pain points are. Kind of refer back to the very first webinar where we talked about the friction backlog. They can potentially go and work with those teams and their friction backlogs and help identify where AI could help. I'm not going to advocate this in every case, but there is an approach where you can actually use AI itself to help you understand what you should do, and actually probably would advocate for that in a smaller training provider where you're potentially less complex in terms of your overall approach, because you can work with AI, tell it your current makeup, tell it your friction backlog, and ask it, how can you as an AI tool, let's say you use Claude, what things should I be thinking about? Don't ask it to go and build anything for you. Just ask it to understand, well, what is AI capable of? If you truly have a keen person in your organization to do that, I recommend you try that. Otherwise, don't boil the ocean. Go team by team, but make sure that you have at least the stub of your policy statement or charter in place first. I will share as collateral for you after this session what our AI charter looks like in a generalized sense, so you can get an understanding of that, and you're very welcome to copy it, tweak it, or change it. Great, thank you, Andy, for that question. I've got Dawn, thank you very much. I'm glad you enjoyed it. In your Q4, who do you mean by they? Question 4. Let me go back to that actually, so that we can all see it on screen. So question 4, where does the data actually live? I hope that's the question you mean. What you're asking is where a supplier actually stores anything that you put through it. That would be literally geographic location, like, is it on a server in America? Is it on a server in Europe? Is it on a server in London? And there's also the option here of a lot of these AI tools that don't actually store any of your data. What they do is cache it, which basically means it's temporarily stored and then it's completely removed. So there's a few quirks around that as well. Just in case you were meaning this question 4, I was saying that they in this context is the supplier. So if you ask the supplier those questions, they can't answer that. I wouldn't go with that supplier, or at least if you're not happy with the answers, certainly don't go with the supplier. Great. Thank you ever so much for coming today. That is the end of today's session. If you think of any other questions, we didn't get around to them, please reach out to your CSM. Otherwise, I shall see you hopefully on the 25th of June at 11 AM. Please be sure to sign up. I will quickly put the sign up link back on screen. Please use your phones, scan the QR code, and you'll get an email shortly. Have a great day. I hope you're cooler than I am. I'm very warm now with studio lights running around me, so I'm going to go and cool off. Take care.